Welcome to Home Biz Tax Talk. My name is Lysandra Everett. I am the Home Biz Tax Lady and the principal owner of Everett Tax Solutions, where we help you win the tax game. Home Biz Tax Talk airs Monday through Friday. And when you tune into my show, you're going to hear about topics that are important to the small business community. And so, of course, the EIDL grants and loans and things and all of that. Okay, so with the new bill, there is a new round of funding coming, both in the PPP and in the EIDL. EIDL is Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So, of course, one of the things that is making the headlines is the grant portion of the loan. Now, from what I understand from the Small Business Administration, they're expecting that the portal will be available around January 17th. So we will see if that happens. So mark your calendars, right, for January 17th. I got my notes, y'all, because it's a lot going on with these new grants. So let's go back to the initial round of EIDL. And I think a lot of business owners really remember this because people are very raw about it. The issue is that money went really, really quickly. And a lot of it went fraudulently. That's the sad part. A lot of that went to fraud. And those fraud cases are being investigated. So if you got that free 10K, just know that those areas of fraud are being investigated. So don't be surprised when somebody comes knocking at your door for that 10,000 that you did not have. All right. So when the initial EIDL first opened, they said they were giving out up to $10,000. And then they later specified that it was $1,000 per employee. Because that was not made clear at first, a lot of business owners felt cheated, they felt lied to, and it is what it is. So now the what the Small Business Administration is saying is that businesses that applied for EIDL that may have either not gotten the grant or got less than the 10,000, you may actually receive the full 10,000. Okay, because this is still in development. I know our news cycle goes fast. You think, oh, this passed, it should be in place. It's not. There are still things that are being hashed out. So that's what they're saying, that they may actually get the full 10,000, but it's not crystal clear exactly on how that's supposed to happen. But now there are new rules for the targeted EIDL grant, okay? And this is the part that I don't think people are really getting. So the rules. To qualify for the targeted $10,000 EIDL grant, a business must, 1, be in a low-income community, and I'll talk about that. 2, have suffered an economic loss greater than 30%, and 3, employ not more than 300 employees. Now, let's start with the economic loss, because that's the easiest thing to talk about, right? This is where your bookkeeping has to be in place. And when it came down to the first round of funding, this is where a lot of people failed by not having their bookkeeping in place to be able to show your profit and loss, your cash flow, your payroll, and all of that. You didn't have it in place. And so again, people felt cheated, but it's not that you were cheated, is that you just didn't have the documentation in place. And we told you then, get your books together. Now that is, that's in the rules. You have to have suffered an economic loss greater than 30%. And so it is the amount by which gross receipts of the covered entity declined during an 8-week period, March 20th to December 17th, 2021, relative to a comparable 8-week period immediately preceding March 20th, 2020, or during 2019. So you've got to be able to show that between one 8-week period and the next, that you had a decline in gross receipts of more than 30%. If you don't have your bookkeeping together, you can't show that. Okay, this is why it's so important. So that's the first thing. The next thing is to be in a low income community. Now, the low income community is a little bit more convoluted. Okay, it just is. And it means any census tract for the poverty rate is at least 20%, or if you're not in a metropolitan area, the median family income does not exceed 80% of the statewide median family income, okay? So that is the current definition of a low income community. How do you find out if you are in a low income community? You're going to have to Google that, because I really can't tell you. I think you can go to the census. Go to the census website to see if you're in a low income area. Other than that, I don't know. Now, talking about taxability and being able to deduct expenses. Now, the EIDL grant is not taxable. Normally, grant income is taxable. So at this point, the only grant income that is not taxable at the federal level is EIDL grant money. Okay. Now, your states may still say that the any EIDL grant that you received is taxable, but at the federal level, it is not. And you can also deduct the expenses that you paid with those funds. So originally, what people got heartburn about is the law says that if whatever money you get from a grant, if whatever expenses are covered by those grants aren't tax deductible. So if I received $1,000 grant and I paid $1,000 expenses, then those expenses were not tax deductible and the grant wasn't income, right? So in a roundabout way, it is still taxable income, right? But now what Congress has done is fix that to meet their intent. Their intent was for the government to be able to support small businesses with funding, and for these businesses to be able to deduct these funds. So that was fixed with this bill. So now the grant income is not taxable and the expenses are still tax deductible, okay? So, which that part is fantastic. All right. Now, one of the other things that was before the bill is that if you got PPP and you got the EIDL grant, your forgiveness was reduced by the amount of the EIDL grant that you received. So if you received $5,000 of PPP and you received $1,000 of EIDL grant, then $4,000 would be forgiven and you'd have to pay back that $1,000. That has now changed so that if your PPP forgiveness is not tied to the EIDL grant at all. Okay. And just as a side note, forgiven PPP loans are not, the part that's forgiven is not counted as income either, and it's also not taxable. The other thing is, how long is it going to take? Okay. Now, again, with the first round of EIDL, the government said, hey, get this money out in 3 days. Now the SBA has 21 days to respond to requests for the EIDL grant. So there are, lots of other moving parts. And unfortunately, a lot of this comes up with more questions. Like, can businesses get a second EIDL loan? As far as we know, the answer is no. Can you get PPP and the EIDL loan? Yes, you can. If you got an EIDL loan, you can request an increase if you need more funding, but that's up to the administrator. Also understand that EIDL does not come from banks. That comes from the Small Business Administration. PPP was through the banks. The EIDL grant is through the Small Business Administration. So that is the long and short of it as it comes down to this new grant money. Again, you got to have your books in order to request this funding. And in the process of requesting forgiveness for any of this stuff, like the EIDL loan is not forgivable. Okay. If you receive that loan, you have to pay it back. The PPP, there is that forgiveness. But again, you got to have documentation. And I want to talk about this documentation for just a minute because I need people to get that there are specific things that you can use this money for, okay? The rules are listed. You got to know the rules and you have to have the documentation because one of the things that I do not believe has changed is that the SBA can audit this funding and your use of the funding up to 7 years after the loan is settled. Okay, so if you've got 30 years to pay back this SBA loan, they got 7 years after that to go back and audit your records. Okay, so you got to have your documentation in place. And even like I said, with the forgiveness, you got to have documentation with where this money went. You just have to have it. This is why bookkeeping is super duper uber important here. Okay, because if you don't have the documentation, then you can't prove anything. Right? This is also why I recommended having that funding in a completely separate bank account so that you will be able to show, hey, this is where this money went, and it's in one specific place, and not having to comb through, your bank accounts through months and months and months of trying to show where this money went. So some people did, some people didn't. It was a personal choice, but that was just my recommendation. And so that's it, you guys. Like I said, the portal, according to the SBA, is supposed to be open starting January 17th. And you have until they extended the program through December 31st, 2021 this year. So you got all of this year, and make it. Listen, if you qualify, apply. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Oh, one of the questions that I also get a lot is, when does a business have to be in existence in order to get this funding? And from what I understand, you had to be in business prior to January 31st, 2020. So that does not mean you just start a business today, like we have seen on social media. Go start you an LLC today, go get this funding tomorrow. No, that is not right. From what I understand, and I don't think this rule has changed, that you had to be in operation prior to January 31st, 2020, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to show a 30% decline if that applies to you. Okay. So I hope that helps you all out. It is a lot. The rules are still being formed here, so there may be an update later on, but just keep watching. In the meantime, though, get your bookkeeping together to be ready to apply. All right. So thank you guys so much for tuning into Home Biz Tax Talk. Again, we air Monday through Friday, and you can come right here to get your questions answered about your home business taxes. All right. Have a great day, and I will see you all next time. Bye.